Missing in Hushtown Season 1 is proudly sponsored by the following: Relive Studio, Andy B's Boutique, 615 Real Estate Advisors, and Hometown Connect. Thank you to our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by the following: J.R. Miller Homes. Small towns talk, and we've been listening. Welcome back. This is Missing in Hushtown. I'm your host, Jules. This is Season 1, Deputy Mike Campbell. Let's go. The small historic town of Cross Plains, Tennessee, is just one in a handful of cities grouped together under one county, Robertson County. I moved to Robertson County just over 10 years ago and settled on a small farmstead outside of city limits. I was hired to teach at the neighboring county's high school, at White House High School, and loved being a Blue Devil. I was smitten with the small town vibe and community support, something very different than what I experienced growing up in the big Orange County, California city. What was apparent to me immediately, and although it was foreign to me, was that most people from this area stuck around this area. Most people knew each other's parents, grandparents knew other grandparents, and your math teacher may have been your parents' math teacher. Traditions ran strong and were held on for dear life. The Blue Devils were not one to let anyone forget that in 1997, the high school won the state football championship. Ironically enough, none of the students yelling 97 through the halls when I taught there were even born in 97. Looking back, it makes sense. A small town holds on to traditions of Friday night lights, families gathered together for weekend meals, and the water towers painted in celebration of the, you guessed it, state championship of 1997. It breaks my heart that I would walk by a bench every day to go from the parking lot to my classroom, and I never once sat on this bench. I never once stopped and read what it said. I never once stopped and noticed it. I was so busy getting to my next task. But there it was, a concrete bench with a memorial plaque that I never stopped to read. I was busy. Life was chaotic, having moved across the country and trying to impress my new coworkers. I wanted to succeed in teaching and help my students. I truly loved each and every student. And here I find myself 10 years after I began teaching at White House High School, searching for justice for a Blue Devil alumni. A Blue Devil whose family placed a memorial bench for her in front of the school. The same bench I walked past without a second thought each day for multiple years. The same bench that clearly states it was dedicated in memory of Jennifer K. Wicks. It wouldn't be until years later that I would even hear about Jennifer and Adriana Wicks. And this is because I asked a local Facebook group for true crime case recommendations. This town, which knows everyone, knows sports statistics from decades ago, and rallies together for Friday night lights, this town I call home, this town I love, has this town failed the Wicks family? Have I failed the Wicks family? I wanted to know more about the first week of investigation into the disappearance of Jennifer and Adriana Wicks. So I reached out to the one name I continued to see on police reports. You've heard it here already before. Typed next to RO, responding officer, was a deputy named Mike Campbell. After a little sleuthing, I was able to find him. And as this case continues to show me odd connections, my dog trainer was friends with his friend, so we had a mutual Facebook connection. And that's how I got in touch with former deputy Mike Campbell.
I remember arriving to talk to Joey to just, field type questions of trying to get the backstory of what was going on and when he last seen her, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Without reading verbatim the report itself, the one thing that stood out in my mind was he had mentioned him dropping her off at a gas station and her getting in a four-door white Mustang. And I thought that odd. And then he had mentioned how he he was frustrated at it because he had to deal with, and I don't know how he worded it, but just the frustration of dealing with the car seat. And I seen the car seat in the corner of the room behind the front door, as a matter of fact. And I asked him if that was the only, I said, well, do you have more than one car seat so you wouldn't have to, mess with them? And he said, no, we've just got the one. So I notated that in my report. You don't want to accuse anyone of being a liar, but their stories are just not making sense. Four-door Mustang. But I asked him again, I said, could you describe the vehicle one more time for me? And he was adamant about it being a white four-door Mustang. Once I turned my report in and the detectives took over, as a rookie patrol officer, or deputy rather, you don't really have the luxury of knowing what the detectives are doing or in what time frame. I do remember Mrs. Kathy's look on her face when I arrived at her home to initiate the investigation, as it were. I remember setting my recorder down on the table, explaining to her that I needed, as much detail as possible, etc., and just seeing the look of desperation, of help, and heartbreak. But she was adamant in her certainty of, this is where the investigation needs to start. This is what you guys need to do, this as quickly as possible. Can you start this tonight? We need to go now. She was very sure that something was not right, and very fair question. I would say that it was a lack of experience of a rookie officer to rookie deputies. Oh. I don't know. I can remember telling Deputy Head, when we were walking out of the home, Deputy Head and I had made a brief conversation, and the one thing that I remember is, we both agreed that something is amiss here, and we both agreed we need to get a detective involved, because the last thing we want, and being a new rookie, you remember certain phrases in the academy, and one of which was the fruit of the poisonous tree. We don't want to do anything that would jeopardize, because we felt like there's something going on here. Don't let us be the ones that would screw this up. And we turned it over to the detectives. And sadly, I don't know that we pushed as hard as maybe we should have, or done what we were legally bound to be able to do. As far as going into that, I would like to make a few statements. I would go on any record to say I'm not in law enforcement to this day, and never will be again, because of my experience there. I'm not a good old boy, and I felt like the department as a whole, minus the handful of true good officers there, it was nothing but that, the good old boy, situation. I did leave that department and start working for the city of Ridgetop, where I felt that they come after me even then, to the point that I had to go before the board to keep my certification. And some of the things that were brought out was extremely devastating, as far as the type of person that they were trying to paint me to be, from a liar to a womanizer. Luckily, the board did vote for me to keep my certification, that I could stay an officer in the state of Tennessee, and I chose not to. So if the Sheriff Bollinger himself sat there and said the things that he said at that hearing about me and another deputy at the time, as a matter of fact, he was a patrol sergeant, for him to say these things about us, and him be the sheriff, no way. I do not need to be a part of this. This is They're more worried about defaming me with 100% lies than looking for missing persons or doing drug bust or raids or, what cops should be doing, changing a tire for somebody or something. It was financially unfair, mentally and emotionally draining and unfair. And I've moved out of the county. I've left law enforcement. I've washed my hands. I truly am doing even this interview for Casey and her mother, because there's zero chance that office has done a damn thing for them. My opinion. Please. I'm not saying they haven't, but I'm not politically motivated, and they surely are, or were. Well, after 20 years of putting things behind me, I can remember thinking, how do you defend yourself when a sheriff under oath is swearing that A, B, and C is true? And you're thinking, my God, how do you let your wife know? How do you let your church and friends know? How do you pay for an attorney to try and help prove that this is not true? I don't recall them bringing up anything other than because, they had painted me as a liar and this womanizer, etc. I do remember, I don't remember what caused the questioning, or I believe it was during the hearing, actually. It was brought out that I had even lied about the 4 doors. And to prove that, whatever angle, I was having was motivated for, whatever twistedness was going on in my mind, to be that liar and womanizer to the point that I would lie about a man's statement. What's really interesting is all of it was recorded. When I talked to Miss Kathy, when I talked to the Bennetts, I was recording it all. I've never heard of what happened to that tape, because I turned it in with my report, and I was reprimanded because I didn't write in the report. When I asked Detective Carlisle about it, and another time I'd mentioned that tape, and I said, well, if you guys go back and listen to the tape, and they were like, what tape? You didn't put it in your report that you turned in the tape. And that's when it started snowballing downhill quick for me and the type of person that I am. So it was just a nightmare out the gate, I suppose. I don't know where in the building, but there's like we give it to the detectives is where it would go.
I'm Kathy Neal, and I'm Jennifer's mom, Adriana's grandmother, Mimi. As alarming to me, the things that were returned to me that I knew she didn't have with her. But then when you put that along with the things that are missing, car seat, diaper bag, wallet, gone. Never seen again. Yet Mike Campbell distinctly remembers that the car seat was sitting there when he goes to do a welfare check on him. That was on Saturday. Mike Campbell, after he wrote his initial police report, when he done the welfare check, he was the reporting officer on the case. And so he wrote his report and turned it in. That report, of course, had what Joey had said about the 4-door Mustang and 4-door Camaro that Mike had, or Officer Campbell had questioned him about and called him out on. And he wrote all that in his report. Well, the following week, the newspaper, the local newspaper, the Robertson County Times, they came out with a story and where they quoted these quotes from his police report in there. And Joey and his dad mainly, his dad was always the spokesperson, went to the Robertson County Times and wanted to retract it and, said it was lies. And they said, well, it's in the official police report. So that's where we got our information. So they go to the police department, to the sheriff's department, I should say, and, raise Cain about that. And so Gene Bollinger was the sheriff at the time. Sheriff Bollinger retracted the report and fired Officer Campbell and fired him for falsifying his report, for writing lies in his police report. So, of course, I confronted Sheriff Bollinger about it at the time, and I said, why would you do that? This is your officer versus who might be a potential suspect in a crime, and you just harmed any case that could come down the road in the future by not backing your officer, who is bound by the law to write an accurate report. And he says, my officer may be the one to hurt any future prosecution. And that's why he is no longer an officer here, Gene Bollinger even goes further and tries to have Mike Campbell's post his commission, his badge, try to take his badge. And so he couldn't be a police officer anymore. And I went to his post hearing and I testified on his behalf and against Sheriff Gene Bollinger. And he kept his commission to be a police officer. And that was the right thing to do. I did that to fight for my girls and the integrity of the case and the initial police reports. But I also did it to fight for Mike Campbell, because I met Officer Campbell probably a month before Jennifer and Adriana disappeared. He was newer on the sheriff's department, young officer. He was going to be assigned to the Cross Plains area, to where I lived, at least in that part of Cross Plains. I don't know if it was the whole, but that was going to be his patrol area. And he was so professional. We were out in the yard one day or something, and he pulls up, and I'm like, why are the police here? It was just him to introduce himself, and that he was new on the police force and with the department, and wanted to introduce himself because this would be his area to patrol, and left us his business card and said that, if we ever needed anything, to reach out to him. And I found out that just in standing there talking to him that he was a Marine, and that he had been an MP, I believe, in the Marine Corps, and that he had a passion for law and order. He had a passion for being a police officer. So for this man to come along and try to ruin this young man, Gene Bollinger was the one who was lying. Plain and simple. Not Mike Campbell. So it was a good day when Mike Campbell kept his post and kept his badge. He had no marks on his record, and that's why he won, because there was no marks on his record, and, there was my children's case being used to fire him, to ruin his career, to take his badge. I never understood it. I never understood it to this day. I don't understand it. I wish someone from the old days, while they're still in this world, would come forward and let me know what the connection was that Gene Bollinger had with the Benton family that caused him to fire and accuse of lying and fire the reporting officer on the case, who caused him to treat me and my family like we were criminals, to not do everything he could to find out what happened to my kids, to not get search warrants to go in and look for the smoking gun. I would like to know why he didn't. And I hope someday I know. And I hope someday that someone will help me out with that. and let me know what they know. That would be awesome.
Thank you to our episode sponsor, J.R. Miller Homes, a real estate investor and home builder in Middle Tennessee, and Primetime Crime, Crime with a K, a weekly true crime podcast. Missing in Hushtown was executive produced and written by me, your host Jules with Anley Audio House, LLC. Casey Robinson was co-producer. Special thanks to John Thorpe, Patrick Robinson, my parents, and Jen Rivera, and to our children. To follow our continued efforts on justice for Jennifer and Adriana Wicks, you can find us on Facebook at Justice for Jennifer and Adriana Wicks. This page is personally managed by Casey herself, and you can find me, Jules, on Instagram at Your Host Jules. Notes and updates can be found on our website, www.missinginhushtown.com. Please help us continue to grow by considering leaving a 5-star review and rating wherever you're listening. If you have a tip for this case, please call 1-800-TBI-FIND or dial the anonymous tip line at 615-562-0819. Help us bring the Wicks girls home. To donate to this family's continued fight for justice, please visit GoFundMe.com/Jennifer and Adriana Wicks. And to support the podcast and to help us continue this production, you may click support the show in the show notes and donate a Wicks kiss. 10% of all profits from season 1 of Missing in Hushtown will be given to the Wicks family indefinitely. As always, you're wanted, you are loved, and you deserve to be found. Don't you forget it. I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.